What is technology? We answered this by watching The Quest to Fire. I'm Allie Payton.
I'm Riley Dumproff.
I'm Rachel Eggers.
I'm Lindsay Dickens. Oh, sorry.
I'm Alex Wilkinson.
Okay, so I focused on the first question of what is your definition of technology and how has it changed throughout this class? So at least for me personally, technology, I thought of something as more of like a materialist thing and something that was more like new, cutting edge, like something more like flashy. But watching The Quest of Fire and also like throughout this class, I've learned that technology is just anything that's been created throughout the years. Like in The Quest of Fire, when it talks about or when it shows creating fire and weapons, like that shows technology in like more simpler ways that I didn't really think of previously. So it's not just like the high end creations that are being produced, but technology is normalized by like, or is a normal thing with fire and weapons being created.
So what kind of technology did we see in the Quest of Fire? We saw things such as spears, large bats, arrows with launching systems. We saw language with how they were communicating with each other. We saw fire as a technology itself and different technologies in order to transport fire. And then we even saw how they discovered how to create fire with things like sticks. And then we also saw clothing, the use of animal skins and stuff to clothe them.
All right, and how were they used? A lot of these were weapons, and you could tell in the movie that some of these certain groups were intimidating the other ones with all their weapons, and they were using them to kill them and fight, and they also had to hunt for food and cook it with fire. They also used their language to communicate, even though it was a lot of grunting throughout the movie. And then you could also see that they wore a lot of like clothing that was from animals. I assumed for warmth and then protection from just day-to-day things that they would do. And then I also saw that they used the fire at night for light, and then they also used it for warmth and cooking food.
And I've focused on how do they change the environment for their users. And for the first one that I want to go over was weapons, stuff like spears, large bats, and arrows. And weapons really made it easier to hunt successfully, which caused them to have better nutrition. And they were also able to fend off other people and animals to create more of a safety within them. And another point that I want to talk about is language. And they use gestures and sounds, and they were able to communicate more efficiently and accomplish tasks more successfully. Like going on hunts, they were able to communicate that they wanted to do this, and it was all around, it made it as being a better source of basically getting food or any other task that they needed to accomplish. And the third point that I want to go over is clothing, and this made it easier to withstand any types of weather, whether that be cold or sunlight or anything rather than that. And it also protected them from any foreign objects like thorns and briars and stuff going through woods. And it just protected them all around from stuff that they wouldn't have gotten if they didn't create clothing. And the last one that I want to go over is fire, and that allowed them to be able to create warmth and food wherever they needed it. And it also was able to use as a light source.
Slide the part that I focused on was how did they change their users. So the technology that they use, like weapons, spears, large bats, arrows, and things like that, made it easier to hunt successfully. So, like if you can hunt a large animal and have meat, and then that helps with nutrition because you have like different things to choose from, versus just eating plants or whatever. And then language, they were able to communicate better because they could express what they wanted to do, and that communication, that use of language, also helping each one of them like sort of like rewire their brains. Um, clothing They could survive in cooler temperatures because of the fact that, they had clothes. And lastly, fire allowed them, which was sort of like the whole main point of the film, um, that they were looking for how to create fire. And I looked this up online, but they used fire as a light source, and the first group had a small flame, but that flame got extinguished, so they went in search of how to create fire, and they came across the second group, and from there they got one of the members of that group to help them be able to create fires over and over.
And lastly, this is our works cited page. We use the catalog from Wisconsin State University.